The truth about living up north year round, the cost, some of the hidden things that will happen that nobody tells you about. Tonight, we're going to talk about what it's actually like to live in northern Michigan year round, who it's for, who it's not for, maybe some costs and things you aren't anticipating. As always, my name is Gino D'Angelo. I am your local northern Michigan real estate guide, and I come to you every Thursday at 7 to answer your questions, talk about what's going on in northern Michigan, and just make sure you're as educated as possible. Look, I had somebody stop into the office today and said they just love these videos because it's their way of staying connected to Petoskey. Doesn't sound like they'll ever move back here, but they have deep connections, deep roots. They knew almost as much about this town as I do, which was super cool. So if you're just watching this because you want to stay connected to northern Michigan, maybe you've moved somewhere else or you're living far away, happy to have you here. As always, drop a comment. Let me know where you're watching from. I love to know where our videos are reaching. It seems like we've got people from all over the place. And I know relocating to northern Michigan is a big topic, specifically this time of year, as more and more people discover northern Michigan and decide to give it a shot. So look, maybe you're watching this because you're thinking about moving to northern Michigan because you were just here this summer or you spent the fall here. And I want to make sure if that is the case that you know what you're getting into, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I get a lot of mean comments on the internet, but I also get a lot of people that thank me for being honest and sort of telling how it actually is and just giving the truth, which I'm happy to do. So there were some new overlays. Before we get too far in it, the company that I use to stream these to you, I upload these on YouTube, but there's a company called StreamYard, which is a streaming company. They make it super easy. When I logged on tonight, they said there's some Halloween packs. So what do you think? Should we have a Halloween theme here on Halloween Eve? I'm going to leave this up for a second. Paul says, hello from Chantilly, Virginia again. Thank you so much for watching, Paul. Happy Halloween to everybody who's out there watching. We've got a good one tonight. We're going to talk about what it's actually like to live in northern Michigan. And I had this reality today. I was going to look at a piece of vacant land for somebody that wants to sell it over in Central Lake. It was about lunchtime. I was driving through Charlevoix. I wanted to stop at the Salad Fork only to find that it was closed for the season. And that made me think of the live tonight because that is one of the realities we deal with here in northern Michigan. Oh, I don't like the way this looks. I'm going to take this off because it's hiding my pictures, hiding my name. All right. Tell me, what do you like better? Do you like that? Do you like the festive banner up, or do you prefer to keep it normal? Let's put the dancing skeleton up. Candy pumpkin. There's some good ones. Q&A. All right, let's just leave the candy pumpkin up for Halloween. So happy Halloween. I hope you're going to get a bunch of candy, you, your kids, your grandkids. I hope you're safe tomorrow night. It's interesting with Halloween falling on a Friday. I think that makes it a lot better because, schools are half day here tomorrow. So, and look, Halloween kicks off the holiday season in northern Michigan. It goes from Halloween. I always say this. It goes my birthday, which was 10 days ago, October 21st, my 42nd birthday. It goes from my birthday, which I think kicks off the holiday season in northern Michigan, not to be a narcissist, but that's just the way it works for me. So my birthday, right into Halloween. Before we know it, Thanksgiving will be here. Then Christmas, then New Year, then the January, February ski season. And before you know it, it'll be spring again, and we'll be getting ready for another fun-filled summer in northern Michigan. So if you're watching this live, which a lot of you do, if you're watching the replay, let me know. What is your favorite season? Excuse me. What is your favorite season in northern Michigan? Everybody loves summer. I think fall can be underrated. Winter underrated. Spring's my least favorite season in northern Michigan. I'm not going to lie. So we're going to talk about why people fall in love with northern Michigan. And this is sort of an obvious one. I've been asking people, we've had a ton of people relocating here because of the videos. It seems like we're attracting more and more people every month. And I've been asking them, what is drawing you to northern Michigan? And the response I'm getting a lot is the lakes, the slower pace of life, the walkable downtown, that it's safe, it's clean, there's a high quality of life, schools, the healthcare systems. There just seems to be a lot of people that are drawn to northern Michigan for some very, I would say wholesome, it's not because we've got, it's a big city or they're being forced to live here or their company relocated here. They're choosing to live here because they just want a slower pace of life. They want to go to the water. They want to walk through the woods. They just want a higher quality of life and maybe to just slow down a little bit. So places like Petoskey, Harbor Springs, Traverse City, Charlevoix, Boyne City, Gaylord. We're starting to get people calling a lot about little places like Elk Rapids. I was just over in Elk Rapids today. That's a great community. So it feels like Northern Michigan is just actually just drawing some of these people to this area, and they're choosing to stay. Um, a lot of people were selling houses too, have spent some time here or have some connections here. There's also a decent size of the population that's relocating here that has never been to Northern Michigan, doesn't know anything about it. And some brave individuals are deciding to roll the dice and bet on Northern Michigan. And for the people that have done that yet, nobody's come back to say they hate it. So that's a good thing. Lot to Vegas. Am I saying that right? Lotto Vegas. I'm in Texas. I hate the summer. It's funny you say that. I was actually just talking to a client. I've got a client has a house on Torch Lake, and his neighbor downstate just relocated here from Texas he's like the head of Lenovo in North America, like a really prominent job. And he said that the summers in Texas are getting out of control and they're just too hot. So maybe this summer I'll fly down to Texas and do a video on the streets of, Dallas or Houston. I'm actually going to Texas. Fun fact. I'm going to Austin next Monday for a conference. So I'll be in Texas all of next week. Maybe I'll record. It's not the summer there, obviously, but maybe I'll record a video or do some B-roll or something. So one thing I want to make sure that people are aware of if you're thinking about relocating to Michigan in all seriousness is there's the Instagram version, which shout out to myself at Gino D'Angelo Realtor. If you're on Instagram, make sure you follow us there. We're doing some really cool stuff with Instagram. There's the Instagram version and there's also the reality. So if you go on my Instagram, you're going to see the Instagram version of the boats, the nice houses, the cute downtowns, the festive decorations. But coming up soon this winter, we're going to be more vigilant on showing you exactly what it's like to live in Northern Michigan in the tough times. So a lot of Vegas, we are looking at Traverse City area. Love it. Traverse City is great. Direct flights from a lot of places in Texas. What part of Traverse City you're interested in? Have you narrowed it down to what part of Traverse City you'd like? As always, if you have any questions or just want some free advice, reach out to me directly. Hi again from Marietta, Georgia. We hate the heat. Fall and winter is our favorite. Absolutely. You hear that in a lot of the southern states that they just hate the heat. And does it seem like for both of you in Texas and in Georgia, is it getting hotter? Because I'm hearing that a lot from people in Florida, is it's just getting too hot down there and they're choosing Northern Michigan for a reprieve. So who actually thrives here? I get this question a lot. What kind of people, not yet, but prefer out of the city limits? Absolutely. Once you go, whether it's west or east in Traverse City, there's a lot of great options out there. So, let me know again if you need any help with that. Can't stand the summer humidity in Virginia. Absolutely. And this is something, again, the climate in Northern Michigan is drawing a lot of people. It is beautiful. I'll tell you, I was just telling my assistant Candace's today, this week has been the best week of fall weather I can remember in Northern Michigan. It was like 50, 60 degrees, sunny. The sun was hitting the leaves. It was beautiful. I mean, it was just like driving through a picture. And I felt very, very fortunate. I think this channel has made me pay more attention to maybe makes me appreciate living in Northern Michigan more, because I'm having so many conversations or hearing people say, I missed the leaves, or I need to come up there to see the leaves. And it's like, well, I drive through the leaves every day and I don't even pay attention. So it's definitely made me appreciate where we're at a little bit more. So the people that thrive here are remote workers, retirees, people that value quality community, quality schools, quality healthcare. And I hate to say it this way, but I have to, because I always promise to keep it real with you guys, that don't need to make a living in Northern Michigan, or they have a finite skill set. Maybe they're a doctor, they're a lawyer, they own a business, there's some other niche here that pays well. And look, I'm just being honest with you. There are not a ton of high paying jobs in Northern Michigan. Now it's getting better. There's, some factories opening up, and there's, tons of, the service industry and that sort of thing. Traverse City's by and large the best as far as needing a job in Northern Michigan. Outside of Traverse City is difficult. But if you need a job in the people that do the best in Northern Michigan are the people that don't actually need to work in Northern Michigan. And I hate to say it that way, but it's the truth. So if you're retired or you're working remotely, those are the kind of people that we're seeing thrive in Northern Michigan. Also, the people that embrace the seasons. If you're going to live here full time, I would hate for you to come here and love it in the summer, but hate the other 3 seasons. Now, I think summer and fall, you're probably going to love. Winter is the wild card. And I'm constantly trying to come up with ways or give advice to people. Like there's a lot to do here in the winter. You can certainly ski or snowboard. You can certainly snowshoe. You can um, just hang out in your house and watch the fire. You can read. You can, look, I do a little bit of everything. I love to snowboard with my son and his friends. I love to travel. I like to slow down a little bit. And I was talking to somebody who's thinking about relocating here. We had coffee together and I was talking about they said, what do you do in the winter time? And I said, love to ski and snowboard. I travel a little bit because things slow down, but I embrace the slower pace of life because if you came in here, if you follow me around for a day in July and follow me around for a day in February, you would think we were on two different planets. And I was saying that half jokingly, but it's also the truth that it is so busy here outside of the winter months. And even the winter can get busy, specifically around the holidays or, the busy ski weekends. But it's nice to just sort of, and I think that's what winter is meant to, a lot of animals hibernate during the winter. And I'm not saying humans should hibernate, but I do think we need to slow down a little bit. And winter sort of forces us to do that. So, um, if you've come here in the summertime and you're not familiar with the winter, but you thought to yourself, look, I think I could live here. I would encourage you to come and hang out here in the winter. Just see the area, see the difference, and make a decision. I think that's a really solid way to start the discussion. The elephant in the room is always winter. And again, I've been talking about this in the last few lives. We're going to do a lot of content this year around the winter because I want to give you the best perception or reality of what it's like to live here in the wintertime without actually being here in the wintertime. So I've got some cool ideas. I'm not going to share them yet because they're not fully formulated, but make sure if you haven't yet subscribed, hit the subscribe button. That way you don't miss any of our videos about the wintertime because those are going to be, they're going to be cool. So I'm super excited for that. Petoskey averages about 100 inches of snow per year. We got about 120 inches last year, which was a record. Gaylord got about 200 inches. Traverse City gets about 100. Traverse City last year got 110 inches. Petoskey, I believe, at 120, and then Gaylord was well over 200, which was by far the most amount of snow we've had in northern Michigan. And we're supposed to get a ton more snow this winter, so I'm super excited for it, and I can't wait to see what it brings. So, things like making sure you drive an all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive car or truck or SUV, having snow tires on your car, budgeting for the heating bills to go up. Not only, when you live in northern Michigan, you have a whole different wardrobe between summer and winter. You also have, a different budget. Your heating bill is going to be 4 times as much in the winter as it is in the summer. Your electric bill is going to be a little bit more because look, the days get shorter and, we're losing an hour this weekend. It's 7:00 here right now. It's pitch black outside. So next week, this time it's going to be 6:00. And there are times when you're driving home from work at 4:30 that it's pitch black outside. And that's definitely something to get used to. In fact, I actually had a friend here from Georgia, Lori, if you're still watching, who was surprised. They were here in July and she was surprised with how late it stayed late. Ken says winter here is not that bad. I don't think so either, Ken, but there are a lot of people that are not used to it. Ken, how long have you lived in northern Michigan for? I hope you can see the comments because I made sure I kept them on the screen for you and appreciate you watching live. But look, the schools stay active. There's tons of communities. The communities stay active. There's basketball games at the high school. There's winter festivals. There's skiing. I would tell you, if you asked me to create a locals winter survival guide, and maybe that's something we should do, make sure you go to Nubs Knob or Boyne Mountain or the Highlands or the Winter Sports Park in Petoskey or a couple of the ski hills in Traverse City or the sledding hills and Holiday Hills in Traverse City. There's just a lot to do in the wintertime. And I think it's just making sure you're active. And it's harder because I'll tell you, in the summertime, my office is right downtown. And, if I have a busy day, I'll just leave for a little bit and do a loop around the block and come back. I don't do that in the wintertime because it's just too cold. The sidewalks are snowy. It's just a lot different than opening the door and walking around the block. So if you do buy a house in northern Michigan, or maybe you're going into your first winter in northern Michigan, a couple of tips: make sure your home is well insulated because that will really pay a factor in your heating bills. If you don't have a generator, I know they're expensive, but maybe that is something you should consider because we don't lose power a ton until last year with the ice storm. But it's funny how quickly it's funny how quickly not having power turns into a nightmare. And if you can spend a few bucks and have a generator to make your life a little bit easier, if you can afford it, that's definitely something to consider. Lori says, we noticed it definitely stayed lighter during our visit. Absolutely. And I didn't know that was a thing until, I guess it's just the way that the earth is shaped, the globe of it, that it stays light until 10 o'clock here in July, which is super cool. So it's crazy. So if you come here in July, it stays light until 10 o'clock. But if you come here in February, January, it stays light until 5 o'clock. So, that's a major difference. And look, even like that's something we have to keep in mind is just as a real estate agent, I'll often somebody will call me, want me to look at their house. They're not up here. So I'll go out there after work at 6 or 7 o'clock to see their house to think about selling it. The wintertime, you can't do that because you have to make sure you can see in the light time. So you definitely have to, adjust your schedule accordingly. Ken says 15 years full time. Awesome, Ken. Before that, I was a weekender for 25 years. Ken, where'd you come from? I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I know that. If you don't mind, Ken, drop a comment. Let me know where did you live before Northern Michigan? I one time had a showing in a blizzard and the people thought it was the coolest thing ever. And I think it caused them to buy the house. There's just something about a blizzard in Northern Michigan. And look, there's a lot of different ways to look at this. If you have a blizzard in Northern Michigan and you're prepared for it, meaning you've got a super nice coat, you've got gloves, your vehicle can handle it. It's actually fun. Your house is warm. It's fun. And I think that's not only is it having a hobby or having, you know, something to do in the wintertime. I think it's just having an all around plan of how to survive the winter because, go buy a nice coat, spend 3, 4, 500 bucks on a coat, go buy nice gloves, go buy big boots. If you have all the winter gear that you need and your car can handle it, your house can handle it, it's actually quite enjoyable, but it really comes down to um, being as prepared as possible. And the next topic, uh, I've had this conversation come up a little bit recently where people think Northern Michigan is cheap compared to the downstate suburbs. And I had somebody come here and said, wow, Harbor Springs is just as much as Birmingham. And I think it's true. I just think there's more houses for sale down here. Oh, that's so funny. Yeah. So Ken lived in Sterling Heights and worked in Birmingham, Michigan. Absolutely, Ken. Huge fan of Birmingham. I was just there recently. Sterling Heights. We used to always go over to Sterling Heights when I went to college in Oakland University in Rochester. And we would go to, back then it was Lakeside Mall. It's not there anymore, but Partridge Creek and Nino Savaggio grocery store because I'm Italian and it's the best grocery store on the planet. So I've also had some people ask me, obviously we know Petoskey, Harbor Springs, parts of Traverse City, super expensive, and there's definitely clientele for that. But what if you want affordable in Northern Michigan? And I'm talking about towns like Gaylord, Indian River, Wolverine. I think there's still a lot of bang for your buck there. Look, there's some very expensive houses in those towns too, but we just wrote an offer for somebody tonight that is looking at buying a house in Wolverine for under $200,000. And it's a nice home. So as much as we talk about how expensive Northern Michigan has gotten, and it has, and look, we sell a lot of big, beautiful, expensive houses, but we also help first-time home buyers, and there are still options out there if you know where to look. Another thing that I've run into with people is there's fewer big box stores here, more limited restaurants. The restaurant hours change in the wintertime, and that's definitely something to consider. So Ken and the rest of you that are locals, if you're local, what is one thing that is surprisingly expensive about living in Northern Michigan? So Ken, if you're still watching, let me know what's something in Northern Michigan that you think is more expensive, that something that surprised you with how expensive it is. To continue talking about real estate in Northern Michigan, what year-round living means in real estate terms is I'm down there. I bring back, I love that. We were just down there. So I was actually at the Nino's it's just outside of Birmingham in Bloomfield Hills. Actually, I heard I didn't know this until I got back, but the Nino's we went to, I heard was across the street. There was a Starbucks on the corner, and apparently that's the Starbucks. Dan Campbell, the Detroit Lions coach, has sort of become famous for Victory Mondays. Him and his wife and their dogs go get Starbucks, and they post a picture on Instagram. Well, I guess the Nino's in Bloomfield Hills is across the street from that Starbucks. So I didn't know that until I left, but that's just one of those interesting things about Michigan that, um, some places like Miami or Los Angeles, you're probably, it's almost like the athletes are separated from the regular, those of us that are regular. But in Metro Detroit, the athletes just live among us. A lot too big. Crime in Northern versus Southern Michigan. I mean, it's night and day difference. Look, Southern Michigan is a very general term. Places like Birmingham, Bloomfield Hills, Novi, very low crime rate. But Northern Michigan has like a super low crime rate. In fact, I know a lot of friends who are realtors who do these YouTube lives and they just talk about the news all night, and we don't have that. There's never, you know, don't tell anybody, but if you were to go get into my car right now, the door's unlocked. If you would go to my house right now, the door's unlocked. I mean, I have another house out in the country. I don't lock the doors there either. I've just always been, um, I'm conditioned to live in Northern Michigan, and I've just never had to deal with that sort of thing. My son is 11 years old, rides his bike to school every day, hangs out with his friends downtown. I never worry about him. Obviously, I see his location, but how often do you get ice storms like last year? Paul, that is a great question. And I'm 42 and I've never had one of those until last year. And hopefully we never will again. They say that was a once in a lifetime snowstorm or ice storm. And I can't, my family's been here for two generations. Nobody's seen an ice storm like that. So I remember a couple of years ago, we had a very minor version of that, and power went out for like a day at the most, and it came back on, life went on. So, fun fact, somebody that works at the power company told me that this is how they measure the magnitude of the storm. They said before the storm, the most power lines that had ever been knocked out at one time. So power lines, the big poles that go out of the ground, the string the lights, the most that had ever been knocked out at one time was 160 before last year. 160. Last year, the ice storm knocked out 2,100. So my thought was, I've got a couple thoughts. One, I can't imagine us having another ice storm like that again, but let's pretend we do. It feels like that last ice storm knocked down every weak tree, and the stuff that survived it would probably survive the next one. So even if it happened again, I don't think it would be as devastating. I do think it forced the local power companies to clear the lines, because maybe this is something you know about Northern Michigan, maybe it's something you don't. And this is why I love the lives, because we end up talking about, I want to say random stuff, but stuff that's random, but it's also relevant to what we're talking about. So if you own a house and there's a power line that runs through it, there's what's called the power line easement, which gives the power company the right to go down and go through your land and make sure they're keeping the trees away from the lines. So my thought is, and I could be wrong, but my thought was the ice storm last year either knocked down a bunch of the trees that were close to the power lines, or the power company came through and as they were cleaning up, made it better. So I just don't think, even if we have the same weather, I don't think it'll be the same outcome. And I also don't think we're going to have the same weather. I don't think that's going to happen again. I mean, I'm not that old and it's never happened, but I know people that have been here a long time that have never experienced that. And the stat I just told about 160 power lines being knocked down, the most ever, to 2,100, that it feels like once in a generation. So let's hope that's the case. Ken says it costs a little bit more to live here, but not unreasonable. I agree. Um, Gas right now, I think gas prices are one of those things that I think people used to talk about it more than they do. And now it's just sort of, but for instance, gas, I saw downstate, or I heard downstate was 268. And I paid attention today when I got gas because I knew I was going to be talking to you tonight, and it's 308. So it's not that much more expensive. Coming from Texas, we don't have state income tax, but we pay high property tax. A lot of Vegas. Can you give me an idea? Do you know, like, how are your taxes assessed in Texas? Or is it a millage rate? I'd love to compare your taxes to taxes here. And of course, when you don't have state income tax, thank you for the comment. When you don't have state income tax, they're going to make it someplace else. It's either going to be a higher sales tax or higher property tax or something. And you just have to make sure, figure out whatever, is the most reasonable for you. And the no income tax, that's why a lot of wealthy people have been relocating to Texas. Obviously, I mean, if you have, a ton of money and you're saving a ton of money, suddenly you can pay a little bit higher property tax because you're saving so much on income tax. So, talk about market patterns. Typically, the first quarter is a little bit slow. The second quarter and third quarter are busy, and the fourth quarter is also fairly busy. So those second and third quarters are usually our busiest times of year, and that's a question I get a lot. So I wanted to weigh in on that tonight. Yeah, this is great. This is a great conversation. A lot of interactions tonight. Drop your comment. Let me know what you're thinking about, what you're wondering about. Ken says, silver lining, I cut down 20 of my trees that were severely damaged. Leaf blowing has been much easier this season. Ken, if you don't mind me asking, where do you live in Northern Michigan? What city? I don't need your address. Just what city? I couldn't tell you off the top of my head on the rate. Sorry. Let me just look this up. I'm going to Google this while we're talking. How are property taxes calculated in Texas? It seems okay. So they're assessed the same way. In Texas, property taxes are calculated by using two main factors: the taxable value of your property and the tax rate. I'm gonna look up the average millage rate because they're calculated the same way. I'm gonna Google average millage rate Texas. Yeah. So the averages in Texas is 70. That's interesting. Thank you for causing me for looking at, yeah. So it's 70, the highest around here. And I should look, but like downtown Petoskey, which is one of the most highly assessed areas, is like 58. So that's 70 millage. That is an expensive property. Not that I didn't believe you, but yeah, I'm gonna use that in a, I'm gonna make a note of that because I want to use that in a video later. 70 mils is a lot. If you are over 62, you are exempt paying school taxes. Yeah, in our county in Georgia. Um, I've heard of them doing it. I had somebody come on the live maybe a month or so ago and ask about, there's a movement to abolish property tax in Michigan. I haven't paid attention to it, but I don't think it's gotten many legs. Between Nubs and the airport, Ken, you live in one of my favorite parts of Northern Michigan. Uh, no, that's a great spot to live. I was actually just driving through there. I love the gas station that's across from Teddy's because it's always quiet and they always do good. It's always clean. I got gas there and I was driving that stretch on Pleasant View around 119, and that is a very pretty stretch of land right now. I get a lot of questions. We've had a lot of people. Lakefront property's always been popular here, but I swear it seems like more and more every year, especially as it's gotten more expensive. And people are even now are asking me, when are we going to start seeing more waterfront listings hit the market? And it seems like, there's two times a year, the shoulder seasons, late in the spring and then early, like this time of year. So later spring, this time of year are the best time to buy waterfront property. And the reason that a lot of properties hit the market now is a couple of things. It's a good time to buy a waterfront property because a lot of people say, why would I buy a waterfront property just to close it up all winter? And I've got a couple of thoughts. If you were to buy a home on the water right now, it's November, close in December, fix it up, get your furniture, get in before you know what Memorial Day is going to be here, and the house will be exactly how you want it. And you'll be able to use it for the season and not miss a single day. So when you're buying, obviously now you're buying for next year. And look, people still come here in the wintertime. If you're going to buy a waterfront home in Harbor Springs, maybe west side of Burt Lake, maybe you want to ski. And, you certainly can do that still. So, just something to consider. When you're talking about the best areas for different types of buyers, if you're thinking about retiring, I would say Petoskey and Traverse City are great locations. If you want a little slower, if you want more of the big city amenities that you're used to, I would say Traverse City is a good option. If you want, a little bit slower pace of life, Petoskey is a good option. They both have great healthcare. I've actually sold in the last week. We've closed on two homes for people that were retiring. One was in Petoskey, one was in Traverse City. Friends of mine that they ended up becoming friends that bought in Traverse City, sold their house in Colorado, and were actually surprised by how much value they got in Traverse City. So that was really interesting. One thing that you should think about if you're considering moving here, think about your lifestyle. Where do you want to hang out? What do you want to do? What's important to you? And I would tell you to live, pick a house that allows you to be surrounded by your lifestyle. If, my guess is Ken skis, so he probably wants to be close to Nubs. If you want to, you know, have your boat close by, make sure you're by a dock and that sort of thing. So, that's definitely something um, to take into consideration. Again, let me know if you're watching this live or the replay. Where are you watching from? I know a lot of you jumped on late. The amount of people watching it shows me has skyrocketed since the beginning. So, yeah, let me know. Thank you. I definitely think you have to want the Northern Michigan lifestyle. It's not enough to just say like, hey, I think this might work for me. The people that live here and thrive are the ones who are dialed into living here and love living here, because it's not about escaping to Northern Michigan. I would say it's about embracing it and making Northern Michigan work for you. Um, if you're somebody that needs to be super close to an airport or, a big airport or super close to a major sports team or something, maybe you still want to be close to a mall or close to the entertainment options that a bigger city has to offer, then Northern Michigan's probably not for you. I've often thought, I love Northern Michigan. I could see a time in my life maybe wanting to be closer to those things, especially as I get a little bit older. But, right now, Northern Michigan is a place for me. And I do think, let me hide this. I think this is remove this. Okay, cool. That looks better. So it's really about embracing Northern Michigan and making Northern Michigan work for you. Um, I have had people relocate here, and it wasn't a deal breaker, and they definitely didn't leave because of this, but feel like they got a little bit of cabin fever in the winter just because they didn't have a solid game plan of how they were going to navigate it. And that is definitely something um, to consider. And look, and I've also had people who've only ever spent summers here that came here year round right away and found a way to love it. So that's definitely something that happens also. But if you're thinking about coming to Northern Michigan, you're watching this live or the replay, and you're either thinking about coming to Northern Michigan or it's been on your mind, or look, a lot of people reach out to me. I had somebody call me that was considering Cape Cod, Newport Beach, or Northern Michigan. Now, those are three vastly different areas, and I love having the competition. I almost feel like I'm the unofficial mayor of Northern Michigan because my job is to convince these people, or not convince, help them discover if Northern Michigan's right for them. I don't ever want to sell somebody at Northern Michigan. I'd rather be your guide, meaning if you've decided that you're going to investigate Northern Michigan, I'm not going to give you the hard sell. I'm going to tell you, as I do every week for a very long time, what's great about Northern Michigan. If you tell me your situation or your lifestyle, I'm going to say these are probably the things you're going to love about Northern Michigan, but these are probably the things you're not going to love about Northern Michigan. And look, as again, Northern Michigan's unofficial mayor, there are some things that I don't like about Northern Michigan. I wish we had more variety of restaurants. I wish some things stayed open later. But look, wherever you live, you're going to wish, if you lived in Birmingham, you might wish that it was a little bit quieter. You might wish it was a little bit slower, less people. So wherever you live, there's going to be things that you don't love about the area you live in. But again, Northern Michigan is really about making it work for you. And look, everybody that lives in Northern Michigan, whether it's full-time, part-time, is making Northern Michigan work for them. Because think about it. Maybe you come here, you're only here in July. That's the part of Northern Michigan that works for you. You love the beautiful weather, the Caribbean blue water, the 70 degrees and the 75 degrees and no humidity, and you don't want any other part of it. And that's okay. Or maybe you want the whole experience and you want the 75 degrees and no humidity in July, but you also want the 10 below and 2 feet of snow in February and everything in between. And that's okay too. And look, I've got a friend who has a house in Bay Harbor that they rent out in the summertime because he makes a ton of money doing it. And he only comes in the winter because he's a ski bum and loves to ski. So there is a version of Northern Michigan that I believe works for everyone. Now it's just, does that lifestyle work for your schedule, your budget, your lifestyle? And that's really what it boils down to. So definitely something to consider. If you've been watching this far and you haven't yet subscribed, make sure you hit the subscribe button. If you're not following me on Instagram, Gino D'Angelo Realtor, we're doing a lot of fun stuff, showing you some behind the scenes and that sort of thing. I like to connect with as many of you as possible, build a relationship. I see so many familiar names, Ken and some other people. Paul says, no humidity in July sounds amazing. The best, I was in 2 summers ago. For whatever reason, I had a trip planned. I was in Clearwater Beach, which I love. One of my favorite places. And a lot of people love Miami, Fort Lauderdale. I love Clearwater Beach because I have a little kid, or not a little kid anymore, but I had a little kid. And I think that is the best town in Florida to take a little kid. And we were there for whatever reason in June, the end of June, and the water was 90 degrees and it was humid the whole time. And it rained, pouring rain 1 hour every day. And I said, this is why people choose to live in Northern Michigan, because 70 and no humidity, 75 and no humidity that's Northern Michigan. It's never really humid here. Maybe when it rains a little bit, but again, if any single person had the ability and they were here in July, it's a very easy sell. But one of the reasons I started making these videos is there's 11 other months in Northern Michigan, and July is awesome. August is awesome. But with the way schools are now, August you start the middle of August, kids are going back to school in other states. So you definitely notice less people here. September, October, I think right now we're in the end of October. September, you get local summer where it's still warm, but there's nobody around. You can still go to the beach. Super fun. October, fall is, again, one of the most underrated times in Northern Michigan. And then you get into the holiday season, which we're about to start. I'm super excited for that. Let me know if you're in Northern Michigan, if you're watching this live or the replay and you're in Northern Michigan, what are you looking forward to this winter? Is it the holidays? Is it the tree lightings? Is it your friends coming up, your family coming up? Is it skiing? Is it just things being slow? Is it just your opportunity to slow down? I'd love to hear what you are looking forward to most this winter. So drop a comment again, whether you're watching this live or the replay. We recently moved to Greystone. Oh, absolutely. We love the fort. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Vern Hole, for watching. I love that's one of the more people don't know a lot about that. We sold a house in the Highlands this year on East Wind Drive, Vern. If you know where that's, if you're familiar with that, it's on the golf course. It's on the Moor, I believe. I did a video last year about living in the Highlands because I'm I'm starting to feel my love for the Highlands come back as we get closer to the wintertime. It's my favorite place. I know there's a lot of people that love Nubs, the curly fries, the local feel, but the Highlands has a special place in my heart because my son started skiing there when he was like 2 years old, and now he's going to be 12 this year. He's a great skier. Him and I go out, we go night skiing, we ski on the weekends. And there's a lot of places to live in the Highlands, and there's a lot of places to live around Nubs too. Don't get me wrong, but the Highlands, well, again, we sold a house over there for over $1 million. It's a couple on the market right now on the golf course. We actually sold two. I've sold two properties in the Highlands recently. That house, and then I sold one of the hotel condo units right behind C6, Camelot 6. The ski lift, those are great if you want. They're like a hotel room. They're like a big hotel room. You can use them, but you can also rent them out. And those, you can walk from your back door to the cherry lift, which I think is an awesome way to live in northern Michigan. Lowest lane in the Highlands is the longest ski run in Michigan it's like 1.25 miles, super long, super flat. I think it's a green. It's not a blue. I'm almost positive it's a green diamond. I guess it could not green diamond, green. It's a green run. Ken says skiing and snowmobiling. Absolutely. Fun fact. When I grew up in Indian River, my friends and I would drive our snowmobiles to school. And I actually wish we got more snow now. So northern Michigan doesn't get as much snow now as when I was a kid. That's how I can tell I'm getting old. I'm starting to say stuff like that. So I would buy a snowmobile. Ken, correct me if I'm wrong about this. How often are you able to ride your snowmobile, Ken? And if you do you go to the UP or do you just stay around here? Because I love to snowmobile. I just feel like we don't ever have enough snow to do it. And those snowmobiles have gotten so darn expensive that it's just an expensive toy to have if you can't drive it a lot. So Ken, let me know, how often are you snowmobiling? Because maybe this is the answer I need. Also, this is a friendly reminder. If you're going to ski in northern Michigan, this is the time of year to buy your ski pass because a lot of the prices are going to go up starting next month. And I want you to save as much money as you can. That way you can live and have more fun in northern Michigan. So I'm going to hop off here in a few minutes. Love talking about the Highlands. Love talking about skiing and snowmobiling, just comparing the climate and the time change to different states. And it's interesting. It seems like we're getting a lot of the same areas here in upper, generally 3,000 miles. Ken says, wow, that's you're putting some miles on there. So good for you, Ken. It seems like a lot of the southern states. So for a while, forever, it was Florida in the Midwest, like my whole career. And then we started getting some more Texas because it was getting hotter, and then Arizona, and then California, and then like Washington. And now we're getting a ton from Colorado. So drop a comment if you're from Colorado and watching, maybe you haven't chimed in tonight. That is an area we are definitely starting to pull from. And I think there's a lot of similarities between Colorado is the Highlands a neighborhood or a geographic area? Paul, the Highlands is neither. It's actually a way of life. It's a lifestyle. No, I'm just kidding. I'm going to share this with you in a second. So the Highlands at Harbor Springs, I'm going to share my screen with you. Share screen. The Highlands. Here we go. I'm going to hop over here. So the Highlands at Harbor Springs is a Boyne-owned property. It's directly across the street. Let me pull this map up, see if I can zoom out. So there's the Highlands. Directly across the street is Nubs Knob. So you probably can't see my cursor, but the Highlands is right here. This is like where it says Teddy Griffin's Roadhouse, really cool restaurant. This is like a valley. There's a gas station right here. Nubs Knob is right here. So basically when you're on the hill, I bet if you look at the pictures here, they probably don't have pictures. Let me go back and see if we can, let's go back. I want to look at images. So when you're there, I want to see it from the hill. Okay. So, okay, that's not going to work. So this is the hill. When you pull into the Highlands, this is what you see in the wintertime. If you were looking the other way, I'm going to show you Nubs Knob. You can see Nubs Knob from they're directly across the hill from each other, and it creates a really cool view. But I guess see this is what you would see from this is what you see from the Highlands, basically from Nubs Knob. So let me go back to the Highlands. I'll tell you a little more about it. The Highlands at Harbor Springs. It's a Boyne-owned property, mostly skiing, snowboarding, that sort of thing. It's currently closed, of course, but there's hotels here, there's restaurants, lift tickets, but they just do a really good job. There's actually Holiday at the Highland. There's actually this, I'm going to go in here and see if it shows. There's this lit trail through the woods. I have a picture of it. I'm going to do another video of this year because, so the short answer is the Highlands it's a resort, but you could also, there's also a golf course there. So there's actually a lot of houses in there, believe it or not. So yeah, great question. All right, guys, I've kept you long enough tonight. Make sure you stay safe out there. If you're going to be in Northern Michigan, it seems like every week somebody from this channel stops into the office. I'm located right downtown Petoskey. I am here all the time. If you stop in and I'm not here, 4 championship golf courses at the Highlands. Absolutely. Yeah. The Highlands, they have a social club. The Highlands is one of the more underrated places to live in Northern Michigan. And it's surprising how many different ways there's condos, there's big, beautiful houses. So definitely, yeah, if you're considering Harbor Springs or Northern Michigan in general, and you like to golf or ski or just live in a beautiful neighborhood, definitely consider the Highlands. So what I started to say was, if you are in Northern Michigan this winter, stop by the office. I'm 228 East Mitchell. Just Google us. I'm right downtown. Today we had somebody stop, but I wasn't in the office. So my assistant called and I came back after an appointment, shook somebody's hand, talked to them. So I love meeting you guys. I think this is an awesome community. It's not just me, it's you guys talking on the lives and commenting and answering each other's questions. And I'm very grateful that you share your Thursday nights with me. So again, if you need anything, reach out to me. If you're not yet subscribed, please do so. It'd mean the world to us. And I hope you have a great Thursday night.